Hey everybody, what's up and welcome back. If you're new here, I'm Liz, your host here on Crimes Untold and also here on my YouTube channel. Now, if you are a returning subscriber, thank you very much for continuing on being with me, being a part of my lovely true crime family. If you are new here and stumbled upon this, sorry for my awkwardness. I didn't upload on Thursday, and that is generally due to the fact that I had a death in the family, so I decided to forego uploading on Thursday. If you are a personable person, a family type person, you would understand. If not, you're welcome for this upload, I guess. So you guys kind of liked the true crime updates, kind of like news-ish stuff that I added in the past two videos, so I figured I'd just add it into this one too. Did you guys know that they made a series about the Boston Strangler? It's a Hulu series, but it's actually like streaming on Disney Plus. Does anybody else find that a little strange? I mean, I'm intrigued. Keira Knightley's in it. It sounds really cool. I haven't watched any of it, but what do you think? Put it in the comments down below. I will say, I picked up a pretty awesome new book. If you follow me over on Instagram, my handle is LizAustin19. Same thing with TikTok, it's LizAustin19. I picked up this book. Yo, it is hilarious. So it's called Love in the Time of Serial Killers. It's by Alicia Thompson, and I'll read the back so you guys can get the gist of it. So basically, it's PhD candidate Phoebe Walsh has always been obsessed with true crime. She's even analyzing the genre in her dissertation. If she can manage to finish writing it, it's hard to find time while she spends summer in Florida, cleaning out her childhood home and dealing with her obnoxiously good-natured younger brother, and also grappling with complicated feelings of mourning a father she didn't have a relationship with for years. It also doesn't help that she's low-key convinced that her new neighbor, Sam Dennings, is a serial killer. He may dress business casual by day, but at night he's clearly up to something. And it's not long before she realizes that Sam might be something much scarier, a genuinely nice guy who can pierce her armor to reach her vulnerable heart. I highly recommend it. You can see, obviously, with the bullseye. I got this from Target. It was $17, but I got 20% off the cover price, so that was pretty good. And also, I got this too. This is the newest book from Katie Robert. I read this series because of Sarah Ray Vargas. I know this has nothing to do with true crime, just I love reading, but I do have one that's kind of, I'll talk about it in a second, but if I follow Sarah Ray Vargas, and she told me to read Electric Idol and Neon Gods, which are the first two books of this series. Well, I have all four of them now because this is the brand new one that just came out. It's called Radiant Sin. If you like smut books, you're welcome. But the other kind of mystery-ish book or thriller book that I got is called The Island by Natasha Preston. I've read Natasha Preston since she was on Wattpad, and that's when I read The Cellar. Oh my god, love it. I also have a few of her other books. The only one I don't have is The Twin, but I highly recommend you guys to read her books because they're really good. It's a really great read. Again, you can tell the Target symbol, I got it at Target. Mainly because you can get 20% off. Let's see. I did read that there was an article that I found that basically said that there's more harm than good that comes from aficionados of true crime. Also, sorry about my little bat arm. If you're new here, I had gastric bypass, so I look a lot different than what I did when I started this channel. But anywho, when I read this article, I was like, it's people that are interested in true crime. That's why we're talking about it, not trying to cause more harm than good. We're trying to cause more good by retelling these crimes. And that's what I do on this channel, is I talk about a crime or a crime spree that has happened, or specifically this month, that's an unidentified serial killer that's still unsolved. Why would that cause more harm than good when clearly nothing has already come of it. I don't know. What are your thoughts about that? But anywho, let's get into today's case. We're going to be going to North Carolina. One is also a more recent crime spree. It takes place around the same time as the Maine South Huntsman case from my previous video. I'll put it in a card above so you guys can go check that one out. That one is really long. It's over an hour long because it deals with two different cases that I believe are related to one another. The New Bedford Highway Killer and the Maine South Huntsman case. So today we're going to be talking about the Seven Bridges Killer, or also known as the Edgecombe County serial killer. Now, this is an unidentified serial killer that targeted Edgecombe counties in North Carolina from 2005 to 2009. Now, to be more specific, this serial killer has evaded justice in the rural town of Rocky Mount. Now, that's the town that most of these crimes took place. This serial killer, like I just mentioned, has evaded justice in the rural town of Rocky Mount. Now, most serial killers do, and they look for more rural and low-key places to strike, unless they're thrill killers. If you don't know what the difference between, like, a more low-key killer and a thrill killer is, a thrill killer will strike when there is, I kind of want to put it as like a significant commotion that's happening around them, or there's a lot happening around them. They strike, they end up obviously causing a murder or causing a disturbance, and then they flee and they get a thrill off of this. Not that any other regular killer doesn't, but a thrill killer gets that crazy amount of euphoria from striking and almost getting caught, like Richard Ramirez, where he struck in a more populous area, whereas low-key serial killers strike in low, like, non-populous areas, like smaller towns, like the town I lived in where there was a serial killer, Sheila LaBar. I also covered that case if you want to watch that. Brooke McKenna actually covered her right after the new year, I think. It was pretty good. Anywho, so this small town is a part of Edgecombe County, and it's about an hour east of Raleigh. If you don't know where Raleigh is or what Raleigh is, it's basically the biggest metropolis area or metropolitan area in North Carolina. That's where a lot of people go, especially like workforce. A lot of people have moved to Raleigh, North Carolina because of the workforce, because it's cheaper living, it's more cost effective, yada, yada, yada. And it's also about 2 hours from the Atlantic coastline, which makes it a relatively good like drive if you want to take a vacation. So, like similar ties between victims like the last two videos I covered, all of the victims in this case all had issues with addiction at the time, like at times in their life. They were all engaged in sex work. All but one victim has been found. All but one is unsolved. One has been solved. I'll get into that after. Most of these victims were found in the woods, but just barely outside of the main part of town. And they were all found on or near the same road, Seven Bridges Road. Hence why it's called the Seven Bridges Killer. So, Melody Lachey Wiggins was found in the woods on June 2nd of 2005. Her badly decomposed remains were partially stripped, and it would be determined that a fatal blow to the head by a blunt object was her cause of death, but she also suffered from a few stab wounds as well. She had been reported missing by her boyfriend that same year. It was known that she had a checkered past with drug use and prostitution around the time of her death and the time leading up to her death. On June 17th of 2007, a nude and badly decomposed body of a woman was found in a pile of trash behind a home on Seven Bridges Road. The head and arms were detached from the torso, and it was difficult for the medical examiner to determine a cause of death on the remains. This would be the first victim that would associate with the name Seven Bridges Road, but this name would come out later after more bodies would be discovered. This set of remains was determined to be that of Jackie Nicelia Thorpe. She was reported missing back on May 8th of 2007. Skeletonized remains were discovered on March 14th of 2008. This is near Seven Bridges Road by a farmer. He had initially thought that it was just a rotting deer carcass, but it wasn't that at all. This body was in such a severe state of decomposition that it was difficult to determine the cause of death, and the medical examiner still is unable to determine the cause of death. The remains had a pair of underwear still on it, and the hands of the body were raised above the skull, of which showed that she was face down. So, like, her hands were above her skull, but she was face down. So it is possible that she probably was laying down at the time of her death and forced to have her hands above her head. This set of remains was determined to be that of 50-year-old Ernestine Battle, who had been reported missing in February of 2008. The remains of Elizabeth Jane Smallwood would be found along Melton Drive on February 13th of 2009. This set of remains would be discovered by a prison cleanup crew that found her by a soccer field in Rocky Mount. Now, due to the state of decomposition, it is unclear exactly how she died, but it is believed that she could have been dead for up to 6 months to a year prior to her remains being found. Her body had laid unidentified for approximately 8 months prior to her father calling, and she wasn't exactly reported missing either. Her date of disappearing is also unclear. It is known that she did indeed hang out with Nikki Thorpe, which is victim number 2 that had been found. And I also want you to know that Elizabeth Smallwood is actually the sister of a serial killer. That is Robert Smallwood. March 7th of 2009, a relatively intact set of remains was found near Seven Bridges Road, which is kind of an oddity with this case. She was partially clothed, only in a black bra and some white socks. This body had abrasions all over it, and that was determined to be caused by being dragged, and her neck was fractured, of which they believe, the medical examiner believes that she was strangled to death. This body was determined to be that of Tahara Shanice Nicholson. She was reported missing on February 22nd of 2009, so not very long before she was found. So on June 29th of 2009, remains were found by a tobacco laborer in a wooded area off of Seven Bridges Road. This would be determined to be that of 31-year-old Jarnice Latanya Hargrove. She was reported missing on April 25th, 2009, and her remains were skeletal, and her cause of death was determined it could have been strangulation. So at this point in time, after they found this bulk of women, of dead women, this area in North Carolina was in complete hysteria. Like I had mentioned in the Atlanta Ripper case, when there's that much death in an area that's still unsolved and there's still women missing, which I'll kind of mention in a little bit. So they had found the bodies of 6 women, and 3 women were still missing at this time, which we'll kind of figure out and kind of find out what happens to 2 of those women. But so the area's in hysteria. They don't really know what's going on. The governor in the area has no idea what's going on. And it's not until they take a look into the case, and everything is being completely mishandled, because all of the victims they have found are all Black women or African American women that have a history of drug use and also a history of prostitution. So most people will just write them off as, oh, they died, which is really sad to say, because it's the same thing when it came to the Atlanta Ripper case, where they were all just written off because they had delved in sex work in order to make ends meet, or they were just these simple women that were dealt a bad hand in life, and somebody had taken advantage of them and killed them. And they're just written off as, oh, it's just another dead person. No, you shouldn't do that. So like I mentioned, there were still 3 women known to the public that were still missing. And I also want you to know that it's during this whole time. So they found Tahara Shanice Nicholson, and There is a man that would be charged with her murder, and his name is Antoine Pittman. But I'll kind of touch base more on his arrest and trial after I speak about the remainder of the victims, and then I'll go back into him. But I just wanted to mention that to you so you know, like how I previously mentioned at the beginning of the video, that there's one that's been solved, and it's because of the arrest of Antoine Pittman. But that's kind of, yeah. So on March 9th of 2010, the severely decomposed skeletonized remains of another woman would be found in the woods about 37 miles northeast of Rocky Mount. This body was found near a trailer that Antoine Pittman, like I just mentioned, had once lived, which I'll touch on again. This was determined to be the remains of 43-year-old Christine Mary Boone, of whom she was reported missing on January 16th of 2007. So she was found almost 3 years later. So just 15 days later, a man riding his ATV found the remains of 40-year-old Roberta Williams off of Seven Bridges Road. He was driving through the woods, and that's when he unfortunately discovered her skeletonized remains. So flash forward to January of 2011, the remains of 36-year-old Yolanda Lancaster were found in a wooded area off of Seven Bridges Road by a group of hunters. Yolanda was reported missing almost 2 years prior to her being found on February 5th, 2009. And our last victim that is associated with this case is still missing. Her name is Joyce Renee Durham. She was last seen on June 17th, 2009, but she is still considered missing. I believe she's still considered endangered and missing. And to this day, her case is still unsolved. So while police were investigating this case, they found traces of sperm on Nicholson's corpse. And this sperm sample was then sent to have a DNA examination done of it, and through tracing the sample's owner via biological tracing, they then were able to determine that it belonged to that of Antoine Pittman. So Pittman is a convicted felon who lived in Rocky Mount in and around the time of these murders. He then would be charged with the murder of Tahara Nicholson. So his rap sheet includes that of rape, but it was pled to indecent behavior, theft, assault, resisting arrest, providing alcohol to minors, another charge of rape, and driving while intoxicated. He has quite a lengthy rap sheet. A very checkered past for this local, but he also had to register as a sex offender. And when he was supposed to do this, he failed to do so, which caused him to go back in jail. If you're supposed to be a registered sex offender, you should just register as a sex offender, so you won't have to go back to jail. So when police looked further into his background, of which this served as circumstantial evidence during his trial, they saw that he would visit his grandparents' home, which was in the Whitakers, which is not far from where the bodies of Nicholson, Williams, Thorpe, Battle, and Hargrove were found. He also briefly lived in a single-story brick building that was near a soccer field in Smallwood, in which Smallwood's body was found near Seven Bridges Road. So, in 2006, he was known to live in a trailer that was not far from the wooded area in which Christine Boone's remains were discovered. But that's not all. The same day he would be taken in by a traffic cop on Seven Bridges Road, another woman would disappear. That was Hargrove, of which her body would be found just 2 months later in a field that was only 180 yards away. Interesting, right? So he could have had means to kill her, and then he was taken in by the police. So after he was tried for the murder of Tahara Nicholson, about 6 days prior to her body being found, he said that he paid for her sexual services. So during trial, he admitted that he had sex with her. That's why his sperm was on her. And he said that it was about 6 days before her body was found. That's when he had sex with her. Kind of playing into her background. I don't really believe it, though. And he said that after he paid for her services, he then dropped her off near the library in Rocky Mount. But he didn't see her after that. And the jury didn't believe any of this, and they would find him guilty in the murder of Tahara Nicholson. And he then would be sentenced to life without parole. So Anton Pittman is pretty adamant that he's innocent in this case and that he has no connection to the other murders, even though the murder ceased after he was arrested. So I believe personally that since these murders ceased after he was arrested, it is possible he has something to do with the rest of the murders. He's just not letting in on it. But you can't just go all in on one cup when it comes to one person that they have in custody. You have to work all means, work all corners of a case before you can kind of judge a book by its cover. What are your thoughts? Leave them in the comments down below. I would love to know. This case remains unsolved to this day, with the exception of Tahara Nicholson's murder. So that, my friends, is the Seven Bridges Killer, and I will see you guys in Thursday's video about the Zodiac Killer.